Greetings, everybody. Salutations. Arduin, continuing the combat rules. And so I believe we're up to Armour Class and how Armour Class works in the game. Now, the Armour Class chart of Arduin is based on the original D&D chart for Armour Class. It follows a similar system with AC 9 being, the least amount of armor, to AC 2, and then it goes above AC 2, which is something that doesn't happen until a little bit later in D&D's development. Arden, Dave Hardgrave took the ball and ran with it, man. He added extra levels on stuff. He created new classes. He just went for it, and of course, Armour Class became a situation that they had to deal with. Just like they had to change things in D&D, well, they changed things for Arden. So the way it works is when you get to AC 2, then you get AC 2 plus 1, AC 2 plus 2. And what that actually equals is AC 1 and AC 0. The plus 2 is really like subtract that to get the real number. So let's go over the big chart here real quick. So AC 9, personal and normal clothes with no special protection. AC 8, small shield and no body armor, or quilted cloth armor with no shield. Now note, they take things like the shield affects your armor class. So it continues like that. Standard shield, no body armor for AC 7, or leather armor, no shield. Quilted armor with a small shield. The size of the shield affects your armor class in this game. And so it continues along. AC 6, tower/kite shield with no body armor. Studded/branded leather armor with no shield. Leather armor with small shield. Quilted armor with standard shield. So it's a more detailed combination of armors is one of the differences with Arduin. AC 5, scale and chainmail with no shield. Studded branded leather armor with a small shield. Leather armor with a standard shield. Quilted cloth armor with tower or kite shield. So now, the type of shield your players have is going to affect their armor class. AC 4, half plate armor and no shield. Scale and chainmail with small shield. Studded banded leather armor with standard shield. Leather armor and tower/kite shield. AC 3, full plate armor and no shield. Half plate armor and small shield. Scale and chain with standard shield. Studded banded leather armor with tower or kite shield. Greep, hoplite, and Roman legionnaire armor. That's all under AC 3. AC 2, full plate armor and small shield. Half plate and standard shield. Scale and chainmail with tower kite shield. AC 2 plus 1, full plate armor and standard shield. Half plate and tower or kite shield. AC 2 plus 2, full plate armor and tower and kite shield. So as you can see, the shield takes armor up to the next better qualifications. Standard shield takes you up 2 classes, and a tower or kite shield takes you up 3. Remember that all armor and shields have penalties for use, shown in the drop of the wearer's agility and dexterity. Here is how to determine penalty. Small shield and with cloth armor have a penalty of 1 each. Standard shield and all leather armor have a penalty of 2. Tower shields and scale or chainmail have a penalty of 3, as does Greek and Roman style armors. Half plate has a penalty of 4, and full plate has a penalty of 5. Please remember to deduct these penalties from both the agility and the dexterity, and are cumulative. A set of full plate armor with a tower shield has a combined penalty of 8. Thus, a person with said armor and with a dexterity of 15 and the agility of 14 would be reduced 7 and 6 while wearing the armor. This penalizes his ability to move, but does not affect an attack factor, which is figured before any penalty deductions are made. So, you do the attack factor before the penalties, so that doesn't get dinged. A natural AC for a monster or other creatures is simply a reflection of how difficult said being is to hit, not necessarily how hard their skin is. So it's a little bit different from the monsters. Then what they have is a combat chart. And I'll show you a picture of that. And what you can see here is the defense factor. And then you have the type of weapon. Which that's different than D&D. I don't ever remember D&D having a chart quite like this. So, the variable attack matrix above shows the difficulties inherent to each weapon versus some kinds of armor, while versus others, they work much better. A 20 indicates usually that a critical hit has been scored, and a star indicates that it's nearly impossible to penetrate this AC, but to ease gameplay, simply remember that a 20 always hits. However, any AC requiring more than 20 marked with a star cannot suffer a critical hit even if a 20 is rolled. Further, note that a 1 usually indicates a fumble, except where 1 is less than 2 stars, as needed to hit the AC in question. See the fumble chart for appropriate results. So, for example, let's say you have a dagger and you're trying to stab somebody in their normal clothes. Well, you roll 3 or better. This is a better system. So those of you playing 5e should recognize this system. It's right here. It's way older than 5e. Okay? So you got an armor class of 9. Guy's got a dagger. He only has to roll a 3 or better, and you're hit. You see how that works? But let's say you had on, I don't know, full plate armor and juggling around with your small shield. Well, now that dagger needs a 19 or better to hit you. It's much harder to get at you because of all the armor on you. And every weapon has its own modifiers. I mean, its own numbers for the different defense factors. So this was, what they're doing is trying to create a sense of realism in the combat. Then the next thing that is different is weapons damage chart. See that? They just go ahead and say, yep, it's hit. If you get hit with a dagger, that's 3 points of damage, puncture, and slash. So that's what you do with the dagger. You're either slashing somebody with a knife or you're, poinky, 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 depending on your preferred attack method. So you're not rolling the dice. It's just a flat number. I mean, you could do the roll the dice thing, 1d4 subtract 1. 1 being the minimum hit point. Or a 4 just automatically a 3. That's how you could do it. Anyone who takes damage equal to half their current hit point in one blow is knocked down for one combat turn. So again, an attempt to add some realism into the combat. Also, all arrows, crossbows, spears, and thrown knives, etc. have a 20% chance of impalement for double damage. Good to know. If they get impaled, it's going to double the damage. All monsters that use fang, claw, and other non-weapon attacks use the attack matrix line of the same name. So you have an idea then of what the damage is. Basic critical hit chart, which they have. There you go. Then there are other critical hit charts too. It seems to me. I have to see if this is the same as the other two. There's two others in the material. Same as one of them, or if there's actually three. But at any rate. So you take a critical hit, you roll a 10-sided dice to find out where that was. Then, so let's say you rolled a 1, that's the head, automatically 3 points of damage, stunned, fall down, immediately, no movement or combat for D10 rounds. So up to 10 rounds. That person's out. Whenever a leg, arm, etc. is hit, roll a D10 to determine if the left or right, so 1 to 5, 6 to 10, was hit, or if the shield is used, it is 1 to 8 unshield, 9 to 10 shield side hit. A person in shock usually falls down, is incapable of coherent movement, combat, etc., for the duration of shock. Only a 20 on a D20 roll allows a shock victim to remain standing. For a more complete critical hits, see volumes 1 and 2. Yes, so those were more. Now, understand, David did real combat. You know, he was in war. And when he came back and he's playing D&D, he clearly felt it was too abstract and not realistic enough. The mechanics weren't showing what happens. And we've had these discussions. I've had these discussions with people online. You know, how do you do fatigue in combat? How do you do this stuff? It doesn't make sense that you would lose all these hit points. And what's the difference? And there is a actual philosophical difference, idea difference between how hit points are in Arduin and how they are in D&D. And that's something you have to understand between the two games. Which I'll probably have to do, like, read the definitions so you guys can see at a later date. And so David looked at it like, you know, a grenade will kill a super fit person who in D&D terms is the combat expert, has all the maximum constitution and strength, super healthy, just as easily as it will kill the couch potato. You can't, there's some things you just don't survive, and I know that too from experience in life. So he made more attempt to put that realism into the game, is what he did. So that's something to understand that's different about the two games. Since I'm, you know, trying to do a little bit of compare and contrast. So you guys can, you know, kind of get your head wrapped around why things are a little bit different in the games. And I unfortunately have to agree with him. When you're in shock, it's not like the movies at all. So D&D is more like the movies where the guy gets shot like 3 times and he's still wandering around. That happens when you're, like, on the right drugs. But our heroes in those movies aren't on drugs, are they? Reality is, it knocks you on your behind when you get shot. You don't just get up and run around. So, a fumble chart. Some of us get adrenaline going. We can keep going until that adrenaline runs off. But once that adrenaline runs off, you're going down. Trust me on this. You know, I have experienced lots of stuff in my life. I'm not going to go into my whole background and training, but when it hits, that shock, it hits, and the person's going down. It doesn't matter how big and bad they are. Fumble chart. Immediate result and the die roll. So 1, foot slip, lose balance, no attacks this turn. 2, hit wrong target. 3, weapon slips from hand. You know, and it gives like how long it takes to recover. But it has like a whole list of things. Fumble charts are good. You know, they're good to have handy in any game system. And then you have battle boards. He goes on to talk about the battle board is the area in play where metal figures representing characters are moved about during combat and other situations. DM will draw out whatever section dungeon the player is in and moving through. Now all participants can see how much of the room is in the corridor. You know, and he talks about how to obtain one and stuff like that. So if you use minis, you probably know what a battle board is or a battle mat. There's a bunch of terms for it. There's all kinds of stuff now in the market. This was back when I think you were lucky to get the squares. So, boards. And he gives some ideas like how to make one and make your own. There is no reason why you actually have to have any of that stuff for real. Unless you're doing a tactical game. Unless you're really getting into the wargaming side of these games with the tactics. Theater of the mind works. I use a combination of stuff. Like I'll do theater of the mind. I'll get the minis out. Sometimes I'll just use whatever's handy. We played for years where if it came up like I can't figure out what, where the player can't figure out what you're trying to tell them, we just start putting, salt shakers and stuff from the kitchen around and saying like, okay, now, this is the wall. This is where, this is your little guy. Get a little Yahtzee piece out or something, like game, because I was a kid, I was broke, so I couldn't afford all those minis, and there's no way. And I would get minis I thought was cool, which maybe we never even used ever. Just painted them for fun. I still do that. I paint stuff for fun. If it gets used, great. If not, wonderful. So it's not necessary, is what I'm trying to tell you. Description. That's your first and best friend as the game master. And it leaves more things open to the player to visualize for themselves. On the other hand, sometimes you need pictures. Okay, it's cool. And sometimes you need some way for them to figure out what you're trying to tell them tactically. And if you decided to do the big war thing, then you are going to need like some way to represent armies and all that stuff. But that's like another episode, how to do wars in your role-play game. Star Frontiers has a great module that covers everything in that one module, including a war combat with units. So it is a very well-written module from a perspective of teaching people how to play a game in its entirety. So anyway, that should be plenty for today on this. Everybody like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you're thinking. And we'll keep doing Arduin. It looks like Magic is up next. So have a great day. Bye.